Hello and welcome to warrenthornton.com. To everybody who is on the live stream, we have a great show for you tonight. We are live for the whole show so that you can see exactly everything that is going on. And of course, we will have the news a little bit later on. But tonight we are going to start with a special, and it is an investigation. I will make the introductions in a second. But first of all, let's tell you a little bit about this. We are dealing with the case of Luke Mitchell. Now, he is a young man who was put in jail at the age of 14 years of age for the murder of a young 14-year-old girl, Jodie Jones. He was convicted. He has protested his innocence ever since. And of course, there is much to see in this case that we don't know already. If you are one of these people who are stupid enough to go onto Wikipedia, you will see an absolute excoriation of this young man. He has spent 22 years at Her Majesty's pleasure, as far as I'm aware at the moment. He has spent 22 years at Her Majesty's pleasure with no parole so far. There have been 3 appeals which the courts have looked at and astoundingly, in my opinion, have turned around and said there is nothing to retry here. So we're going to go through the whole case. We have with us Sophie and Jen Gale from the literally Free Luke Mitchell campaign. I'm going to come to Jen first. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And welcome to the show, Sophie.
Hey, thanks for having me, Warren.
You're more than welcome. We're going to start, obviously, with both faces are not going to be on camera, and the reasons for this will become apparent. There is still much, shall we say, going on with this case. Jen, I'll come to you first. When did you first hear about this, and when did you first become involved with this story?
I remember vividly being in an office in Glasgow and hearing the newsreader say he had guilty knowledge. And I remember thinking that was very strange, because normally people are convicted by things like science and evidence, and guilty knowledge, I'd never heard that one before.
Yes.
And everyone was talking about it and everyone was getting to play detective. So, I remember conversations with my mother and family members at the time. And I think then it went off my radar for a bit. There was a long period. Now, I should say that he was jailed at 15, but he was 14 when he found Jodie dead. And then
Yes.
8 months later, he was taken into custody.
Yes, it was 8 to 10 months later, wasn't it, Jen, that they took him into custody?
It was quite a long time, yes. It was, she was found at the end of, I'm sure Sophie will correct me if I get this wrong, but it was the end of June, and then he was arrested the following April. So it was quite a long time. And when he was arrested, I remember, sorry?
I was just saying 10 months,
Yeah.
Okay, could people refrain from talking while Jen and Sophie's talking, please? Jen?
Yeah, and then when he was convicted, I remember looking at the picture of him coming out of court. And it was extraordinary because everybody that was reporting on it was saying he showed no emotion. And I thought, you're blind. He was clearly in a great deal of shock. And I remember thinking, I wonder if this is a miscarriage of justice. But I genuinely believe that if that were the case, we would have seen something very similar to what we see now with Lucy Letby. We would have seen people talking about it because this was a child. And yes. I really believe that. I really thought that there would be people in Scotland talking about it. And I wasn't entirely wrong, because Sam Polling of the BBC did, but it passed me by. It was pre-streaming and I heard nothing. And then 3 years ago, I was sat where I am right now and I read about it in Private Eye. And I thought, my God, I was angry at myself for just assuming that I would have heard, so 3 years later, I was so horrified that I became involved with the campaign. So that's how I became involved.
How you became involved. Fantastic. Sophie, I'll ask the same question to you. When did you first become aware of the Luke Mitchell case and what drew you to it?
It's very, very similar to Jen. At the time, I mean, everybody just assumed that he was guilty. It was reported in the press that it was the boyfriend. And it wasn't until 2021 till the documentary came out and it became mainstream that actually there was no DNA, there was no definitive evidence. So yeah, I just started campaigning.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll come to you each in turn, if I may. I'm going to give you The idiotic version, which anybody who ever sees Wikipedia, of course, knows that it's full of whatever anybody wants to put in it. So what we have is the murder of Jodie Jones is a Scottish murder case from June 2003, in which a 14-year-old schoolgirl was murdered in Woodland in a place called Dalkeith. Now, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, in Scotland, by supposedly her 14-year-old boyfriend, Luke Mitchell. She was found murdered with a knife behind a wall on a path where she would invariably meet Luke, having set out to meet him that afternoon. Luke Mitchell, who claimed to have found her almost immediately after a search party set out that evening to find the missing girl, rapidly became the prime suspect, almost immediately actually, and was brought to trial in 2004. It was discovered that a knife he regularly carried around with him, which could have been the murder weapon, and I do stress could have been the murder weapon, had mysteriously disappeared, as had his coat, which he'd been seen wearing that night, and which could, I stress again, could have held incriminatory forensic evidence. Now, I'm going to give you a quick aside here. They decided not to have any forensic evidence, so this seems a bit of a stupid thing to say. Now, the suggestion was that these have been disposed of to hide evidence. There is no fact base for this whatsoever. Equally suspicious have been that these items have been replaced by his mother, who supposedly denied the existence of the previous items. The pouch for the missing knife was found, and Mitchell had marked on it Jodie's initials JJ, apparently, with 1989 to 2003, her birth and death, according to them, as well as a quote saying, "The finest day I ever had was when tomorrow never came." At trial, Luke Mitchell and his mother claimed he had been at home at the time, but phone records suggested otherwise, and his brother supposedly admitted, as confirmed by computer records, that he had actually been watching pornography, saying he would not have done so if no one else had been at home. Don't think that's absolutely the case, knowing most 14-year-old boys. As a result of this, the mother was additionally charged with perjury, although this was dropped when Mitchell was found guilty of the murder in January 2005. The brother, who originally gave a different account and admitted to having agreed with his mother what to tell the police when he first spoke to the police, this is all conjecture, by the way, had also initially been charged with perverting the course of justice before telling the account he would give at trial. Mitchell continues to protest his innocence, and several attempts to overturn his conviction have failed. A large amount of discredited speculation is made about the case, including inaccurate claims that no DNA linked Mitchell to the murder, and this indicates innocence. And the family of the victim have endured online abuse and false accusations, supposedly from Mitchell's supporters. The fact that both the defence and the prosecution decided to get rid of any DNA evidence, that just goes to show you that what is being said here is absolute nonsense. The Joneses family say they've always remained satisfied with Mitchell's guilt. Now, let's give you some of the background. Luke Mitchell was born on the 24th of July, 1988, the younger of two children. Parents separated when he was 11, and he was raised by his mother in relatively comfortable circumstances in New Battle. Mitchell went to St David's RC High School in Dalkeith, and about a year before the murder, Mitchell had undergone several lifestyle changes. Quite why that's... Now, the police made a big thing about him being into Satanism, Marilyn Manson and everything else, and the teachers said that this permeated all sorts of, shall we say, aggressive tendencies and everything. Now, Mitchell was in the school year above Jodie Jones. Jones, various other pupils used to nip off and smoke cannabis who didn't when they were a young teenager. The two began a relationship in and around February 2003. Now, let's get on to some of the more important things. It was known that Jodie Jones has sometimes self-harmed, and what basically happened with the discovery at about 5 p.m. on the 30th of June, this is what they are saying, we're going to be corrected on all of this, 2003, Jones left her home, apparently after informing her family she was going to see Mitchell. Her body was found several hours later on the route she invariably took to meet her boyfriend. She had been bound and murdered. Jones had already texted Mitchell, apparently, before leaving, and he was known to have been aware that she was on her way to meet him, as a relative of Jones had told him so on the phone. Jones's body was located in a wooded area behind a high wall at Rowan's Dyke Path. She'd been killed with a knife. Mitchell claimed to find the body, and the ease in which he was able to find it was later used in court to suggest guilt. A search party had been arranged at around 10 p.m. by the family of Jodi Jones, and when Mitchell met up with them, apparently, according to eyewitnesses, he went straight to the gap in the wall bordering Rowan Dyke's path, climbed through it, and found the body of the deceased at around 10:30 p.m. Nobody's suggesting for 1 second that might have been their meeting place, so he'd probably go there. It had also been noted how Mitchell did not appear to show any emotion or surprise, as we've just heard, while the other members of the search party were hysterical and upset at the finding. Mitchell claimed that his dog, which had been trained to track, had stopped at the V-shaped knot where Mitchell climbed through. Reports on the discovery of the body said it was likely that the killer was in a disturbed and angry state, and that Jones had died from a vicious and frenzied attack involving a knife or similar weapon. Right, let's get into this. Jen, first of all, there was all sorts of nonsense surrounding with all sorts of, because he was into Marilyn Manson and everything else, that some sort of Satanism was involved. That's complete nonsense, isn't it?
That is, and I think with this case, and anyone who looks into it does need to remember that there was a lot of misinformation, or information that had some context to it that was kept back.
Yes.
So he wasn't particularly into Marilyn Manson. He and Jodi met in their first year of high school. So it's funny to think that they met when he would have been 12 and she would have been 11 in their form class. So they were in the same year. And this comes up quite a bit, but for some reason we must have had a lot of journalists in the courtroom, but their ability to report on it accurately that leaves quite a bit to be desired. But no, I think the other thing you have to remember is that he was, as you said, he goes through a bit of a rebellion, but he's 14. That's a common thing to do at that age. It's hardly unusual. It's like they'd never heard of the word teenager before.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get into this a little bit with Sophie then, and we'll keep going backwards and forwards, Sophie to Jen. Sophie, just to give us a heads up here, the brother apparently changed his story, and of course the police separated him away from all the others who were actually there on the search at the time. So they pretty much had him nailed down from moment one, didn't they?
Yeah, he was a suspect from the very first moment. See, just to go back to what you were saying there on about the DNA, it's kind of, there's a rumour that came out that DNA wasn't used at the trial, but it actually was. It was discussed. There was a mixed profile found on Jodi's bra strap, and that was a profile. It had some markers that were similar to Luke's, but it wasn't enough to include him and say that he was the killer. All they could use that to say was that he couldn't be excluded. But that was a profile, and it was mixed in with Jodi's blood and another male's DNA as well.
Yeah, so let's get it.
No further. So, yeah,
let's get
quite
into
difficult
that.
to say.
Let's get into that then. So no genetic material from Mitchell that could be fully explained was found on her body. Mitchell's DNA apparently was actually found on her bra, and Jodi's DNA was found on Mitchell's trousers, although this could have occurred through an innocent transfer. But in an agreement between the Crown and Mitchell's defence team, the issue of DNA was decided to be made irrelevant at the trial, as the pair were in an intimate relationship anyway. As part of the deal, neither the prosecution or defence were going to use DNA for the case. 122 items were taken from the murder scene, from which attempts to obtain DNA profiles proved unsuccessful. No forensic evidence was recovered from the incinerator. Mitchell was the subject of intense press coverage before his trial. So let's stick with the DNA then, Sophie, and then we'll come to Jen again in a second. The DNA, Sophie, there was a used condom found at the site as well, and there was DNA from other people on her clothing. Is that right?
Yeah, so to this day, there's at least two samples that they know to be semen, but it's not there's not enough of it to actually do further testing and pull a full profile from it. And the DNA from the condom, that wasn't actually, the owner of that wasn't discovered until 3 years later after
Yes.
Luke had been convicted. So they went to trial with all this circumstantial evidence and basically painted a picture of Luke as this demonic Satan worshipper. But actually, they've got all this forensic evidence that they just haven't put the resources and time into following it up because they've got their man.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. Jen, just going to get a picture here of the brother, because obviously him changing his story or whatever is shall we say, one of the crucial pieces of evidence they tried to use. Could you just tidy that up for us and let us know exactly what went on there?
Well, yes. I mean, I think for the older brother, it was a perfectly normal day. That was a perfectly normal Monday. And when he makes a statement to the police, he forgets about a trip he made after work. And I think he must have finished work quite relatively early. And he remembers, and he thinks, okay, I'll go and make a revision statement. And, I think that's when the problems really occur. He cannot remember. And I think the police interrogations of him are quite hard to read.
Yes.
You can see that he's in a terribly agitated state, and I think particularly when he's arrested and charged with perverting the course of justice. It's curious. There's no evidence that he did that. Much of the
Yeah.
interrogation is about Luke. They're trying to get him in to kind of get things on Luke. That's certainly how it appears. And so you have this terrified, sort of agitated young man who is, going backwards and forwards. He contradicts himself a lot simply because he clearly cannot remember. And so when he's on the stand, he says, I many times I can't remember. And he's sort of, really, I think there's two things that do it for him there, really. They in that state, they show him pictures of Jodie's mutilated body, and they justify that, and they say, we need you to understand how serious this is, which is a very strange way of justifying it, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This man's life has been turned upside down. I'm sure he understands the seriousness of it, but that's the justification. And he breaks down in tears. He asks for a break. He doesn't get one. And then they say, well, we have your computer records. You were looking at pornography. You must be masturbating. And he is just in the state where he is, as I say, going backwards and forwards. And in my opinion, I don't even know that he was well enough to be at that trial.
In any state to stand trial.
Yes, yes.
Obviously, the police, or it certainly seems, or there may be a hint of police helping him to remember. The problem I have with this now, when he was questioned, he didn't have an adult in the room, as Luke didn't either, did he?
Well, I mean, I don't think there would have been a requirement, because Luke's older brother was, I think he was 21. So
Okay.
they wouldn't, but he was denied legal representation. That is certainly true. Sorry, I think that's what you meant by that.
Yeah, but they obviously, they didn't require an adult there, although it would have been, should we say, beneficial for him to have one there. Let me just come to Sophie on this. Sophie, when Luke was questioned, he was 14. There was meant to be an adult in the interrogation, and there wasn't one. Is that correct?
Yeah, there was a thing in Scotland at the time, like you didn't have to have legal representation as a child at the time, and it was only after it's called the Cadder ruling. So that came about. The Cadder was a man who appealed his sentence through the Court of Human Rights, and they said that because he didn't have an adult present at the time, that gave way to ground of appeal to basically everybody in Scotland who didn't have that at the time. So basically, that was okay. It was that was the norm in Scotland at the time.
Yes, absolutely. And we're going to be showing you at the end of this, at the end of talking to Jen and Sophie, we are going to be showing you both of the documentaries that feature Luke Mitchell with people who have looked into this case very, very deeply indeed, former detectives. Let me come back to Jen here. Jen, the problem that we have here is from what I understand, there's DNA from 3 possible suspects. There were many other persons of interest that were never spoken to at all. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, I mean, I think that Luke was believed at the time that there were a number of people being spoken to, but yes, the person who, I mean, I think Sophie mentioned, and you did, that a condom was found at the scene. And, you know, when they realized that that condom couldn't be linked to Luke Mitchell, it was of no importance to them. But had their inquiries gone a little bit further, they would have, you know, found the person whose condom that was.
Yes.
And he only came up, I think, like I'm sure Sophie will know this, but some years later, did they find him incidentally? They weren't particularly interested, as I say, in finding the owner if he was not Luke Mitchell.
Yeah.
And there was a chap called Mark Kane,
Yes.
who, you know, from a distance, you know, would bear some kind of resemblance to Luke Mitchell, who was out that night and who was an incredibly vulnerable young man that someone had said, you know, he has got scratches on his face and thought he should be eliminated from the inquiry. Now, I should say, I don't think that Mark Kane had anything to do with the inquiry, but because the police didn't properly eliminate him, I think it must have caused him a great deal of distress because his name was thrown out there when people were trying to get to the bottom of this. And that is what happens when the police don't do their job properly, when people aren't eliminated. They're in this sort of state of limbo and accusation that is hugely distressing.
Yes. Now,
yes.
I sort of want to get on to the police not doing their job because this is the crux of the matter, pretty much for me. We've got, there was literally the deliberations, on 20th of January 2005, the jury began their deliberations. These deliberations concluded the following day on January the 21st, and the jury found Mitchell guilty by a majority verdict after 5 hours of deliberation. Now, this trial had taken 42 days, a record at the time for a single person on trial in Scotland. I'm going to come to you first on this, Jen. There's a 42-day trial, and on those 42 days, they've managed to produce no forensic evidence linking, or they hadn't found the murder weapon, and they produced no forensic evidence to link this young man to actually doing this awful deed. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there's many people you'd expect them to call in a case like this. You're absolutely right. You would expect them to maybe call an expert on cannabis, an expert on recall, an expert on how Luke's dog might have reacted. After all, he was being trained to track. Luke would tend the track. All of this, no, they couldn't get that. They managed to get Luke's school bully from primary school to give evidence. He wasn't there in that capacity, I should add. But I think it's interesting that for all the press would tell us he was violent and deranged, how many people at that trial said they had been bullied by Luke? 0. How many people said they had bullied Luke? 1. And his defense was that he wasn't the only person to do it.
Wow.
But there were other quite scary, a lot of young people, a lot of young, terrified teenagers were called to say things like, I think I saw Luke with a knife in his bedroom. And I think about these people now. To be a teenager at that trial must have been absolutely terrifying. And I find it extraordinary that they could justify bringing them in, but not actual experts who were trained for that purpose. I do find that extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll come to Sophie on this because this seems quite horrific. I mean, anybody who's seen the film Salem, of course, where, you know, the witchfinder general turns up and everybody gets off by denouncing somebody else as a witch. It seems as though there was a witch hunt here against this young man because he was different, because he kept himself to himself, lived alone with his mother. And many teachers sort of, the odd teacher came out to say this, that, and the other. But it seems as though there was some sort of mass hysteria gripped by this, Sophie. And the police were under extreme pressure, weren't they, to produce a result because they hadn't done so in 10 months.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, I described this case as a clear example of a moral panic. That's exactly what it was. There was no evidence. And just to go back to what Jen was saying there, at a trial of 42 days, you would expect experts to be on the stand giving their opinion. But what the jury actually saw was they were shown a video recording of the Sky News interview that Luke and his mother done, and they
Yes.
were shown a 20-minute video that Marilyn Manson had made.
Wow.
Things like that. So it's not expert evidence. You're talking about like watching a Marilyn Manson video. Like, what does that prove in a murder trial?
Yes, exactly that. But it goes to trying to sway the jury, doesn't it? That's the thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So what we're talking about here is no evidence whatsoever. Everything's circumstantial. You've got the Lothian Borders Police Force who are under pressure for a quick result, and you've got the jury being swayed by being shown videos of pop stars that he thought might have been cool. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Wow. And we've had 3 appeals. Is that correct? And they've all been turned down.
Yeah, he's had 3 appeals, and he's been through the Scottish Criminal Case Review Commission twice, and they've both decided not to refer his case back to the Court of Appeal. But the last time he had applied to the Scottish Criminal Case Review Commission, they'd actually done further testing. They'd swabbed the area on Jodie's trousers where the knot was tied to see if they could find some crime-specific DNA. And they did actually find small semen samples. That semen was not linked to Luke in any way. There was no markers that matched Luke Mitchell, but they decided not to do any further testing to find
Well,
the owner
let's
of
back that up a second, Sophie. So what we're talking about is a young man. If you're just joining us, by the way, we're examining the case of young Luke Mitchell. We have Sophie and Jen Gale from the Free Luke Mitchell campaign. What we're talking about here is a young man who has so far spent, I believe it's 22 years in jail for a murder he claims he did not commit of a young teenage girl. Now, she was bound with her own trousers. Sophie, they found a semen sample on there, and it is not his. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah. It's a small sample, but what they done was the Scottish Criminal Case Review Commission asked the Crown to release the samples where they'd taken the original samples. The Crown says, no, you can't have the original samples, but we will give you the trousers and you can cut round the area where the original sample had been taken from.
Wow.
And that revealed semen. And they still refused to give the original sample.
So let's bring Jen in on this. So we found, thank you very much, Sophie. So we found somebody else's semen on her trousers, Jen, and they're still not going to review the case and revisit this.
Absolutely. It's extraordinary. I mean, I think this is the evidence that freed Andrew Malkinson.
Yes.
Elsewhere this would be, enough. And yes, and I think they just want it to go away.
Yeah,
but, I'm glad to say I think that public opinion is shifting. But yes, incredible as it sounds, that's right.
Okay. So Jen, where are we now in this case at the moment?
Well, I think questions like that are probably best directed to Sophie in terms of the actual legal side of things, because
Yes.
I see my role as really telling the story, just trying to get it out there, because it's one of these things that when you start to talk about it, it's and this and this and this, and eventually I think it becomes quite hard to take on board what has actually happened. So I really saw my role as actually being the person to explain it. But in terms of the legal fight, well, certainly what I want is to bring this back to court, because I believe that if we can get it back there, we will win. But I think Sophie has been working very hard on that and working with the team to make that a reality.
Okay. And if you've got any questions for Jen and Sophie, by the way, in the audience, just pop your hands up and we'll have a little chat. Sophie, where are we legally with obviously Luke has spent, I believe it's 22 years. He should be eligible for parole after 20. Where are we with this about getting a retrial or anything like this, Sophie?
Okay, so we've got quite a lot of news here. So it's 21 years that he spent in jail. So he's had a
Okay.
parole hearing last April, which was denied. He's got a parole hearing coming up on the 23rd of this month, so that's this Tuesday. His lawyer is asking for immediate release, but it's very, very unlikely that that's going to happen. But procedurally, that's like they need to put something down, put a request down. But we have been working with a law firm, quite a prestigious Glasgow-based law firm, and they have allowed us to do a crowdfunder in order to
Yes.
pay for this so new legal action. Because obviously Luke and his mum, like there is no funding there. It's this is going to take a lot of funding, so we really, really need the public support on this. So
Okay.
what we have is we have a law firm backing us, and we have so they're ready to read the case files and take this back to the Scottish Criminal Case Review Commission. But we need the public's help to fund it. We are working with Crowd Justice. We have a 30-day target to reach £20,000, and that will pay for the case reading and the application.
Okay. And if you could just type that into the box. You do have co-host privileges, so if you go into the chat box, somebody could just type that in there, the GoFundMe page. That'd be absolutely brilliant. While we get Nilus to ask a question, Nilus.
Well, it seems maybe it's my suspicious nature and mistrust of authority, but it seems like those sperm samples, that they found, that they're trying to protect somebody, isn't it?
It does seem very odd. We'll ask Jen that question, and we're going to be showing both documentaries, by the way, straight after we finish talking to Jen and Sophie. Jen, Nilis's idea is that having found another sperm sample, they don't seem to want to look into this case very, very hard.
Well, I mean, if most people listening to this are based in England, they might not be aware of the Emmett Caldwell investigation that happened around about the same time. Emma Caldwell was murdered. Her body was found in woodland in very remote kind of forestry commission land. And the man who murdered her was called Ian Packer, and he was free for 20 years afterwards, in spite of, and this is quite unbelievable, 300 allegations against him, mainly by the women who they were working in sex working. Vulnerable women in Glasgow made these allegations. He was known to take vulnerable women to the location where she was found dead. He even said he did. And senior officers said that they were told, it doesn't matter what he says, do not detain him. And you can find this on the BBC page. So this is happening in Scotland, Strathclyde Police, I think, because Emma was from Glasgow, but round about the same time. So yes, I think that you're quite right to ask the question, in light of that, are people being protected? Because it certainly looks that way. We have to be very, very careful because, I mean, it does seem very obvious when you look into it, a name does come up regularly, but however obvious, it does need to be tested in court. But yes, you're absolutely right to think that.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get into the crux of this with Andy. Andy's got a question. Andy?
Yeah, mine was twofold. One was basically, was there any other murders in the location and whatever, which has been answered. But the other thing was, quite often, murders and things like that are within a family. So was the brother of the accused questioned and tested DNA-wise or anything like that?
Well, sorry.
I don't think anybody else was DNA tested. Were they, including? I think there was a girl. There was a young man who had another girlfriend or something along those lines. Jen, is that correct?
I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what you mean by somebody with another girlfriend. I mean, I know that there was, but regarding, I think the most important thing is that somebody was seen following Jodie the day she was killed.
Yes.
This came up a number of times. This was widely reported. And then it just sort of vanished. And curiously, when you made your introduction, you talked about the case against him as pretty much set out on Wikipedia, that he went straight to the body. Well, that wasn't the version that the search party gave. Revision statements were made, because you can make a statement, but if you don't accept it in court, it's not particularly useful. So about a week after the Stocky Man sightings of the man following Jodie, the search party changed their statements. And around about that time, Stocky Man seemed to vanish. And people in the area, I understand, actually thought he had been found and eliminated, because they did a reconstruction. They kind of did Jodie's final movements, and somebody was identified then, and he said, no, couldn't it be me? I was in England. And it seems, again, extraordinary, but this case is extraordinary, that people went, okay, fair enough, and didn't answer the question, well, if it wasn't you, who was it? And that just sort of went away.
Now, we'll come to Sophie now on this. Sean Murphy.
Just a quick one, Warren.
Yep.
He did say, and it was stated, that he pretty much went to the spot where there was a break in the wall, where the body was fairly close by, from what they're saying. Of course, he would have gone there, because if he had arranged to meet her, and they obviously met there regularly,
yes,
he would have known where to look.
Yes,
that sort of makes sense to me. But yes, for the other semen stains on the trousers, suggests that there was definitely somebody else involved. If that's the DNA from that semen sample wasn't the Luke Mitchell's, then who did it belong to?
Yes,
I'm sure she wasn't at that age. She wasn't particularly promiscuous, and she had had Luke Mitchell as a boyfriend, so she may well not have been particularly promiscuous. So how did that semen stain that wasn't Luke Mitchell's get on her trousers?
Well, let's put those two questions to Sophie then.
Yep, I would love to know the answer to those questions. Why have we not investigated this further? But I know that was quite revetal. That was quite a big thing, talking about the semen samples there. But something else that's just quite as big is after the 2021 documentary came out, where Luke is maintaining his innocence, and it's kind of went mainstream on Channel 5. 2 months after that was when Police Scotland and the Crown decided that they would start destroying all the productions and samples and everything that they held in storage. Yeah.
So just to get this right, and if you have just joined us, by the way, on X, we are looking into the Luke Mitchell case, who was sent to jail for the suspected murder of a 14-year-old girl when he was 14. He was then jailed when he was 15. And has been in jail for 21 years. And we're looking into this case because there is so much wrong with it. So we're talking, they started destroying the samples, Sophie?
Yeah, so discussions started 2 months after the mainstream documentary went out. So that would have been national all over the UK. And that's when the discussion started. And that took them about 9 months to actually start destroying things. And by that time, through a whistleblower, Luke's team became aware of that. They were able to write to the Crown, ask them, is this happening? And can we get insurances that you will stop this? So where we're at just now is that a lot of the productions have been destroyed, but a lot of the forensic samples have not. So they still exist, and they are still available to get retested with more up-to-date modern methods.
Yeah.
And that's our goal. Yeah.
So let's get into this a little bit, because I understand his mother is not very well now, and she's been battling for her son these past 20 odd years.
Yeah, she doesn't keep very well just now, but she's got a lot of people coming round her and things like that. She's got a lot of people to take care of her and things. But she is a survivor, as Corinne Mitchell. she's fought for her son non-stop, and she's done whatever she can to fight for him and keep his name out there. And for a long time, he's been shouting into the void, and nobody's been listening.
Okay, I'm going to come to Jen on this next point, which is quite staggering. Now, everybody who's a regular in the show knows exactly what I used to do for a living. Now, very simply, when you go to take a polygraph test, you'll hear lots of people saying, "Oh, you can beat it with drugs, and you can beat it with this, and you can beat it with that." It's not quite the case. You can get what they call inconclusive results, but then again, it's quite obvious that somebody is hyped up on drugs or whatever. And there are certain medical conditions which, of course, will just null and void. They won't actually prove that, of course, you are telling the truth. It will just make the results inconclusive. Now, let me dispel some things about the polygraph test that they do. A polygraph test is 98% accurate. Okay. The chances of you actually beating one, not getting an inconclusive report, but actually beating one so that it says that you are telling the truth when you're lying are very well. In fact, they're very, very small indeed. You sort of get 98% where they are absolutely accurate, and you get the odd 2% where it's inconclusive. You never get a complete opposite. So let's get into this in the fact that the chances of you not just doing one, but two members of the family sitting a polygraph test and both being able to beat a polygraph are almost infinitesimal. We're talking billions to one. Now, Jen, I'm going to ask you this question. Is it true that his mother and Luke both sat polygraph test and both passed them conclusively?
Yes, that's right. A lot of people try to say he had his eyes closed because it's quite hard to do a polygraph test in prison. And he was in a kind of office with a glass screen. And I gathered that there were people outside that were trying to distract him, make faces at him. So Terry Mullins, who conducted his and Corinne's polygraph test, said, "Look, close your eyes."
Yes.
And they must have been absolutely.
In fact, Jen, it is recommended. I mean, I've sat in on many of these polygraph tests. It is recommended that you close your eyes to shut out any distractions. Sometimes you will even wear headphones just to hear the person speaking in those headphones if there is outside interferences. So that was the reason he was closing his eyes. But then people tried to swing that round, Jen. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, that's right. And I know that Terry Mullins was contacted by a few people, but he pointed out that they would never give their names. You know, they claimed to be experts, but they wouldn't give their names, which says a lot. But it must have been absolutely terrifying for Corinne, because we talk a lot about how Luke was demonized, but you know, Corinne really, really we talk about a witch hunt, but it was as bad for her in many ways, because I mean, the Daily Record, I think, was the worst. They would even tell the public, she visits her son on this day. This is the make of her car. And so she was beaten in the prison car park. She had, you know, a brick thrown through the back of her car while she was driving. And, you know, so she had that from the media. And she so bravely decided, I will take the polygraph test in the glare of the media, and whatever the result is, they will print it, and I understand that. Yeah. So, you know, pretty amazing.
So I'm going to ask a question here, because there is, shall we say, there's some extracurricular activity around the appeal. People have a vested interest in stopping this. Is that correct?
Oh, I think lots of people must do. Yes, because you know, when this breaks, it will affect an awful lot of people. You have to remember that the man who prosecuted Luke is Alan Turnbull, Lord Turnbull, and he's as powerful in the Scottish legal system as you can get. And even if he wasn't married to the Lord Advocate, and that is the highest power that we have, and he got involved in the case before Luke was even charged. which led me to say that he did this because he wanted to. He wasn't appointed to it. For a prosecutor to get involved before someone is even being charged is, I think, requires some explanation.
Yes,
so,
it certainly does. I'll come to Sophie on this one now. Then, Sophie, where can people donate or contribute if they so wish to?
Yep, so if you just search into Google Crowd Justice Luke Mitchell, you'll find our Crowd Justice page. It's Crowd Justice Help Bring Luke Home.
Yep, so repeat that once again for everybody.
So it's Crowd Justice Help Bring Luke Mitchell Home. And if you just pop into Google Crowd Justice Luke Mitchell, it'll probably be the first result.
So if after watching the 2 documentaries, you feel that you want to help, please remember that and go and help in any way you can. If after the 2 documentaries you feel you don't, absolutely fine. But I think after watching the 2 documentaries, you will realise that there's a huge miscarriage of justice here. Sophie and Jen, we kept you longer than you intended to come on for. I hope that you will come back and see us again.
Absolutely. It's been fantastic, Warren.
Fantastic. It just remains for me to thank Jen. Sean Murphy.
Well, the question is, if he gains his freedom, if he is acquitted on appeal, the problem being for the police is it is going to throw a lot of other convictions into question.
Not only that.
And they certainly do not want that, because it will, their crime solving rate will bottom out.
It will.
And they don't want that.
Okay. Here's the other thing as well. That means that also that Jodie's murderer is still out there. Jen and Sophie, thank you so much for your time.